Okay, so in this video, we will discuss the cost of common stock. Common stock can be issued in two ways. Number one, directly by issuing new shares, which is represented by RE. And number two, indirectly by reinvesting or retained earnings, which is represented by RS. If you want an explanation for both of them, you can see it in the previous video. Now, we have already discussed this as well, that even capital raised indirectly through retained earnings has a cost related to it, and that cost is the opportunity cost. The firm should earn on its reinvested earnings at least as much as its stockholders themselves could earn on alternative investments of equivalent risk. Now, cost of common stock RS. So, what rate of return can stockholders expect to earn on equivalent risk investment? The answer is RS, which is your required rate of return. Now, how do you calculate the required rate of return? That is the question. There are three methods of doing so. Number one is the CAPM, capital asset pricing model. Number two is the discounted cash flow method. And three is the bond yield plus risk premium approach. In this video, we will go into all three methodologies. So the first approach, which is your CAPM approach, okay, I'll erase all of this. The first approach, which is your CAPM approach, this is the formula where R stands for the required rate of return, RF is the risk-free rate, RPM is the market risk premium, and B is the beta of the stock. The risk premium can be calculated as the market return minus the risk-free rate. Now let's look at an example. Assume that in today's market, risk-free rate is 5.6%, market risk premium is 5%, and Allied's beta is 1.48. Using the CAPM approach, Allied's cost of equity is, so you simply need to plug in the values. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because you have done this chapter in detail previously. So the risk-free rate is 5.6%, the market risk premium is 5%, and the beta of the stock is 1.48. 13% is the required return that an investor of Allied stock requires. So an Allied stockholder requires a return of 13%. Okay, why is it not going ahead? The second is the bond yield plus risk premium approach. Now, this approach is based on the concept that your cost of equity will always be higher than your cost of debt. Let's look at from the investor's perspective. We all know a rule in finance that the higher the risk, the higher should be the return to compensate the investor for that additional risk. सो जितना ज़्यादा रिस्क होता है वहीं पर सबसे ज़्यादा रिटर्न भी आपको मिल सकता है. Now, if we look at bonds or debt in general, bonds have a fixed interest payment, and at maturity you get the par value back. So they are safe investments. आपको पता होता है कि आपकी cash flows क्या होंगी, आपको कितनी amount मिलेगी. Whereas if you are a stockholder of an organization, if you have shares, dividends are not fixed. Dividends are only fixed for preferred stock, and that too if the company has enough money to do so, if the company has made profit. If you're a common stockholder, then the profits, the dividends is not at all fixed. So the dividend can fluctuate. It's the management's decision how much dividend to pay. Plus, even the stock price itself can fluctuate a lot in the stock market. Nothing is fixed in the stock market. The price can go up, the price can go down. So you can see that the stock market is more volatile compared to the bond market. And because the stock market is more volatile, it should give you a higher return. As an investor, you should get a higher return if you're a stockholder rather than if you are a bondholder. So the cost of debt would be less compared to the cost of equity. This is exactly what this formula is telling you. It's telling you the required rate of return on stock is equal to the bond yield plus a bond risk premium. So if you know how much is your bond yield, what is the cost of your debt, you can just add some percentage points to it and you will get a benchmark that, okay, if my cost of debt is, let's say, 10%, that my cost of equity would be approximately 13 to 14%. That's what you're doing over here. Empirical studies suggest that the risk premium on a firm's stock over its own bonds generally ranges from 3 to 5 percentage points. So, previous studies have shown that 3 to 5 percentage points ज़्यादा होता है आपका cost of equity compared to your cost of debt. For example, given that Allied's bond yield 10%, its cost of equity might be estimated as follows. So the bond yield is 10% over here, and the risk premium is 4%. They have taken a midpoint, 3 to 5 percentage के बीच का point लिया उन्होंने 4. It can be 3, it can be 4, and it can be 5 as well. So this becomes 14%. ठीक है, क्या कह रहे हैं वो? कह रहे हैं क्योंकि हमारी bonds की yield 10% है, तो approximately we can make an estimate कि हमारी cost of equity तकरीबन 14% होगी. Therefore, one might use a range of 3 to 5% of the risk premium and obtain a range of 13 to 15%. But you will get a range from it because it can be 3, it can be 4, it can be 5 as well. So if it is actually 3%, then your cost of equity will be 13%. And if it is 5%, then your cost of equity will be 15%. So you can't get the exact estimate, the exact value, but you can estimate a range from this formula. Now moving ahead to the third method is the dividend yield plus growth rate or discounted cash flow approach. You have already studied this formula in your principles of finance. This formula is your constant growth formula when you need to calculate the price of the stock given that the growth rate of dividends is constant over here. Now from this formula you can actually derive RS, the required rate of return. How you can do this? This over here is dividing, so when it will go on that side it will multiply. So RS minus is equals to D1. Now this P naught is multiplying, it will go on the other side and it will go in division. Now you can shift this G on that side as well. So you have derived the formula for required rate of return from this formula. But in order to use this formula, you need a good estimate of D1 and of the growth rate. You can easily find the price from the stock exchange. And dividend is also easily predictable if the company is already paying a dividend, but growth rate is usually difficult to find out. This is the formula for required rate of return. Over here we are saying that in equilibrium the required rate of return is equal to the expected rate of return. If you look at this formula closely, this is a formula of expected rate of return. The formula for expected rate of return is dividend yield plus capital gains yield. This is exactly the same thing. This is your dividend yield and this is your capital gains yield. So you're saying that expected return and the required return are equal in equilibrium. Let's look at an example. Allied stock sells for 23. Its next expected dividend is 1.25 and analysts expect its growth rate to be 8.3%. So you have P naught, that is 23.06. Next dividend is 1.25 and growth rate is 8.3%. 3%. Let's plug in the values. D1 over P naught. So D1 is 1.25 divided by P naught, which is 23.06, and 8.3% is the growth rate. Solve this and you get an answer of 13.7%. Now you can even average all three methods in order to find an average cost of equity. But if you're confident with any one approach, you can even use that approach only. So from the CAPM, we got an answer of 13%. By using the bond yield risk premium approach, we got an answer of 14%. And the DCF is giving us an answer of 13.7%. So if you want, you can take an average plus all of them and divide it by 3. 13.6% is the average cost of equity. Okay, now cost of new common stock RE. Cost of retained earning and cost of new common stock is different because in new common stock you will have to issue new shares in the market, and for that you might have to hire an investment banker, and the investment bank will charge fees for their work. So investment bankers help the company structure the terms, set a price for the issue, and sell the issue to investors. The bankers' fees are called flotation costs. Now, because you are issuing new shares in the market, you need to consider these flotation costs as well. There are two ways of dealing with these flotation costs. Number one is to add the flotation cost to the project's cost. So remember, this is related to your capital budgeting discount rate. This is that rate. So one way of tackling with flotation cost is you can just add it in your initial investment. Number two is to increase the cost of capital. This letter B is the one that we will discuss in this video. So increase the cost of capital. You already have the required rate of return for retained earnings. So we will just add the flotation cost to it. And in order to do this, your formula is this. So your P naught will be subtracted by F, by the flotation cost. Let's look at an example. It's the same example, but now we have a flotation cost of 10%. So if you plug in the values, your D1 is 1.25, your P naught is still 23.06, 1 minus 0.1. So this is the flotation cost, and 8.3% is the growth rate. So if you solve this, your answer is coming 14.3%. So if they issue new shares in the market, their required cost of equity, their required return on cost of equity is 14.3%. But if they use their own retained earnings, their cost of equity is 13.7%. The cost of equity will be higher once they issue new shares in the market because of the added flotation cost that the company has to pay, the investment banker fees that the company now has to pay. So flotation adjustment is simply the adjusted DCF cost minus the pure DCF cost. of 14.3% is the adjusted with the flotation cost amount, and 13.7% is the original one. So 0.6% is the flotation adjustment.